Hey, welcome to the Code Review Weekly Workshop, where we talk about code review. I am going to share my screen. So we're looking at the same thing. I wanted to share one of my favorite things I do from time to time, which is diffing diffs, which we've talked about a little bit. But sometimes I feel compelled to do this whenever an MR is updated. So I'm scrolling to the bottom here. And when an MR is updated, we also rebase. And so here's the really paranoid situation one could be in as a code reviewer so this was the new commit. But when there's a rebase, even though it says this is authored a week ago, during the rebase process, these commits could still technically change. Now, it's not like I don't trust Miguel, whatever. It's often I just get a little OCD and I want to make sure. And if I have time, I'll be like, okay, let me just try to compare the versions. Now, if I went to changes and I tried to compare version 17 with version 18, it's gonna be ridiculous because it pushed a bunch of changes from master. So I'm not even gonna let it load. It's gonna blow up. So I can't do this from the UI. How do I tell from between one push and another push what actually changed?
Yeah, it's a great question. I just don't check at that point because I didn't know there was another way to check.
Yeah. So this is where I open the terminal. So this is gonna get real. What I'll do is I'll do that diffing and then I forgot how they call this, but you can do multiple pipes into a command. So I'll type it out, but I'm going to do the first. So this was the latest push, and then this was the push right before it. And I'm looking for this last commit here. And so I want to pipe in the difference between origin, master, and support. You do 3 dots so that it does the merge difference between the two, the difference between the merge base of the branches. And then I could do git diff origin master with the latest SHA, or I can actually now just curl the diff of that MR. And when I run it, you're now in Vim. I'm comfortable with Vimland, so I'm in Vim right now. There's other diffing tools you probably could use.
Is Vim diff like a default install on Macs? I have it. I didn't install it.
You have Vim diff. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I have Vim. I don't know if it came with that. If I installed it.
But I'll show you one of the reasons I use this, and I really like it. I'm sure that there's other ones, but here's kind of what I'm looking for. I'm looking for these, not where there's the same plus on both sides. I'm looking for, here, we added something copy token, but then I left the suggestion of hey, maybe we should keep it consistent as copy registration. So that's something. Here's why I use vimdiff. Here is, we were adding this block, but then I left the comment of, sometimes this can be falsy. So maybe we want to have an if all around it. Now, for me to compare that the 2 inner blocks are the same, I could just manually delete that outer tag. And now I see, these are the same except for the white space that was wrapping it or whatever. So that's one of my favorite things with vimdiff is it'll update the diff as I make changes to it. So if I really want to just compare 2 blocks, I can kind of just line those up and actually compare the 2 blocks without reading it at all.
That's really nice. I'm I don't know. I feel like I'm a 10% Vim user. I know how to get in there, add stuff, delete lines. And
that's all I'm doing.
I can, I don't know. I know delete a single line. You did some fancy keyboard thing that let you delete.
I did.
Yeah. Lines at once. But I can Google things to get me, and I know how to get out of it, which is the most important. I feel like when you're in Vim is to know how to get out. Okay.
But you could, and so with all that being said, you could, I wonder how effective this would be with diff view. And so I could just read through this.
But it's not colorized. Like
there might be params I can pass to diff view to add to make it colorized a bit, but I won't be able to get that like feedback that I like doing of I really want to compare these blocks that are now moved from each other, and I can align them up so I can actually confirm these are the same without actually reading the code. So, but yeah, this might, I'm sure that there's for non-Vim users, there's another tool to use besides vimdiff, but that's what I use. The main takeaway is the piping of this commit, which now isn't attached to a branch, but is still, I don't know, still available somehow. And then I just pipe the latest MRDiff.
Oh, I like it. And you got that commit from the commits page?
No, because this one, I had to get it from the timeline. Because if you go to the commits page, we did a rebase. So all these be different.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So the main point is diff and diffs when there's a rebase. How can you actually tell what's changed?
The rebase thing, it has caused me problems when I'm trying to do comparison between what changed between two like commits.
Yeah.
So that's cool. I like it.
Try vimdiff. It's if you know how to get out of it, that's pretty good. You'll have to add the exclamation mark at the end because it may yell at you about.
But I mean, worst case too is I can always just close my terminal and then it's gone.
There you go. Yeah. Control C is pretty good. Yeah. Activity monitors, that's next level.
Oh no. I feel like when I run that thing, I feel like I look at it and it's like activity monitors taking a ton of your CPU. And I'm like, this is not what you should be doing.
That's really funny. Hey, John. Thanks for hopping on.
Hello. I was trying to see if JetBrains can do diffs of arbitrary SHAs like that aren't on the. Like you're just diffing it with master, right?
Yeah.
I think if you checked out the head of the branch, well, no. If you checked out like you did the previous SHA before the rebase, and then you said like get, right click, get compare with, and then you put in the branch, I think you would get the same effect in the JetBrains diff here.
Does JetBrains, so what I'm using it is to actually diff two diffs. Will JetBrains let you do that? And if not, what you could probably do is write one diff to a file and then write another diff to a file. And then
like you can
you're muted.
Gone, man.
Sorry. It's not key bound, but if you do the command.
You got muted again. What's happening?
Wait a minute. Why?
You're hitting the.
Oh, you know what? Command shift.
Whatever shortcut you're doing is also it's also
it's the mute.
Oh no.
How convenient is that? You can mute yourself while diffing file.
Wait, it didn't do it this time when I had.
That's weird.
That's weird. I do this all the time.
That's so weird.
It somehow Zoom grabbed the focus. Anyway, Command Shift A, which is also, I never realized this, also the mute key binding.
That's so funny.
It's like Command T in VS Code. It's the search for a command. And the command palette. If you type diff in there, you'll find open blank diff window. And there you can pick any two arbitrary files. Or That's cool. Can also just, I have a temp directory, in most projects, I have a temp directory that's ignored. I'll just dump them in there, and then you can highlight them both and do Command D.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
An easy way to do it.
That's a good idea. I like that.
But yeah, then you get the nice diff viewer with all the coloring and the 3 panes and everything. I know Terry's a JetBrains user, right?
I am. I try to learn new things every once in a while, but a lot of the times it's more like key bindings. I installed that thing that you recommended. It yells at me a lot, but I try to learn some of them.
Yeah, the mode I'm in on that is like, there's some things I just want to use the mouse for, like the debugger, like everything when I'm debugging, all of the buttons there and the continue and skip. I'm like, because you have to sort of like get into that pain and then use the key bindings. I'm like, no, like when I'm in debugging mode, like my mind just wants to click it.
Yeah.
It's the way I think. So I've turned off all of the nags. Like, no, I'm using the mouse for the debugger. Don't bug me about it anymore.
That makes sense. I haven't been great about using the debugger, so I'm hoping. I saw someone ask a question about how theirs was set up, and I saw that you commented on it, so I made it a reminder to go back and look at that thread, because
so powerful.
Yeah.
Like me and Paul, like we watched this John Carmack, the guy who wrote Doom, like arguably the most famous programmer ever. And he did an interview with Lex Friedman, and that's one of the things he was talking about, just like how powerful it is to have your debugger. And like the Golang stuff and all of the stuff I've been doing for remote development, I don't know Go at all, like barely learning it. And like, that's what I rely on, the debugger. I'm like, what is happening here? Like, I know how to read variables and state and stuff. Like, I have no idea the details of the language, but I can make it do what I want just because I know here's the data and here's how I'm trying to manipulate it. And then between that and Chat GPT, like asking it how I do something in Golang or
Oh, I never thought to ask Chat GPT.
Oh man, we rely on it so much, Terry. Like
I'm in the same spot with Go. Like, I'm a maintainer for a Go project, and I'm like, well,
Chat GPT. It's like, what do you think, Paul?
It's our
the web IDE, right?
Yeah, it's our senior counsel. The editor. Chat GPT is the honorary editor.
Anyway, I did sign up for it, but then I don't know.
I know, but now you got to pay for it. If you want.
You have to pay. I don't like.
You want that?
I'm a terrible developer. Like, I don't like paying for things. I think it's not the development. I just don't like paying for anything.
I agree. No, I'm with you, Terry. You have this idealism, and then people like Stallman and Linus Torvalds fill your head with like, software should be free, and that just for me, that just buries me.
The opposite. I'm like, is this marginally useful? Here, take my money.
Yeah, I have started paying for things. I have, but
I probably will pay for ChatGPT because I found it so helpful. It was pretty amazing.
It's changed the way that and Copilot I use a lot.
Yeah.
All the time. It's changed the way I write code. Like, I just like write a little bit of something and then I see what Copilot completes. And then I think brand new newbie programmers, I think it's dangerous because they don't know anything. But like for me learning Golang, I'm like, I know what I want to do. I just don't know how to do it. And in that case, it's great. It's like, here's something that may be wrong, but it's close enough to get me there. Whereas I would have been Googling for half an hour.
Yeah, it almost feels like the advice that I got when I was starting, which is like not to start with a framework when you're learning something. Start with like the language that is like the framework is using first, so that you understand when things are broken. I guess you need to be able to understand when Chat GPT is giving you maybe not correct advice.
Yes, because it's very rarely 100% correct, but it's a great rubber duck at least.
It's like the new Stack Overflow. What are they going to do?
Yes. Yeah. What was I going to say? I don't remember. Oh no. SourceGraph is coming out with an AI assistant tool.
Oh, really?
That's going to be really exciting.
You know that terminal that I use, Warp? I think I kickstarted it. It's got integration with Codex, like with one of the AI engines. And then there you just like type a comment, like a bash style comment, pound space.
Oh, wow.
Like, how do I look at the numbers from 1 to 10, and it'll write out the shell command for you to do that.
I would love it for it to like, right now it's helpful, but then it teeters off to like every command ends up like curling some shell from like, it just ends up doing pseudo curl, like all sorts of very dangerous things for, anyways.
But debugger, Terry, yes, like it's learning.
I'm gonna try. I have it on. I have that channel favorited for like look at this later. So
feel free, like anytime, just set up if you want me to help you walk you through something or if
yeah, I definitely will.
Get you up the learning curve anytime. Let me know.
I was hoping I got like the Golang set up. Well, it was kind of a pain to set up because I wanted it to utilize ASDF's version of Golang, and I did get that working, but it took me a while.
Yeah, mine seems to be working fine, at least for the GitLab agent code.
Mine, it didn't register that there was any Golang installed at all, and I had to like hack it, but it's fine. I got it working. I don't know. I might take you up on that pairing session at some point, because I feel like I went and like hacked some XML file to get it to register that there was a version of Golang installed.
JetBrains support for ASDF, like in general, seems
not good.
Kind of shaky.
Yeah. Yeah. So
that's interesting. Yeah. ASDF is interesting too. Just what it does in general. Well, Terry, you had a question.
Well, I guess it's more so it's not about reviewing MRs, but as part of like when you're doing maintainer things, like we are supposed to make sure that these MRs are labeled by type and subtype, right? I'm pretty sure.
I guess so. I guess so.
Yeah, I guess I have noticed a lot of like missing subtypes. And then it's just like, because you get like a notification about, well, there's just so many chatty discussions that happen. So I feel like sometimes they'll miss, but also it's like not blocking. So like, is it truly required? My thought has been, if I go in and just either like look at the issue, and if the issue has it, make that match. That's the easiest way. But if it doesn't have, the issue doesn't have it, like, do you just like add it yourself? Do you add it and then like ping the author? Hey, I made this decision about your MR. Like, can you validate it?
Yeah. I mean,
sometimes I just change it and I'm like, well, this is clearly a refactor. If it's clearly like maintenance type, okay, I can probably go in and do like a refactor, but I'm like,
well, things get tough for me. It gets really tough when MRs are rarely ever one thing.
Yeah.
And if it's a refactor, which also fixes a bug, what do you do? And my understanding is that the maintenance is for maintenance only.
Oh.
And if something goes beyond that to any kind of user-facing change, it's either a bug or a feature.
I was not aware of that.
Well, I have no idea. I actually don't know why I think that.
Yeah.
That's
like Eric RPM was talking about these yesterday, and he brought up the graphs. Like these basically drive the graphs, that are the three colors for each group. And he said what they're looking for is like consistency. Like, if your group is doing generally the same number of bugs, features, and maintenance, and that even though it's sort of a soft suggestion, like they'll obviously want to see groups doing mostly features. But like, I think that's useful. Like looking at what is this data used for? Well, they use it as a proxy to know, are groups not thrashing wildly between doing all bugs and all maintenance and all features, and are they cranking out features? So because it's in the handbook, they're supposed to be there. So me personally, I wouldn't have a problem like telling the author to say, hey, you need to do this because the handbook says you need to do this, and this is a data that we gather. Here's the section in the handbook that Paul has up that tells you how to do it. And you don't have to take that on yourself, I wouldn't think. What do you think, Paul?
It depends. Like if it's so obvious, hey, just take a bias fraction and do it.
Yeah, sure.
If it's less obvious, it does seem to me that, well, all right. Upkeeping efforts and catch-up corrective improvements that are not features nor bugs.
The thing that gets me is like, subsequent, like in feature enhancement, the second paragraph there, subsequent user-facing improvements that refine the initial MVC by adding additional capabilities, including good user value, usability, and tests. Like to me, like all the stuff I did on the GitLab flavor and Markdown, like none of it was user-facing, but it was all like in support of the content editor.
Why would it include tests?
Scripts, right? So if you look at it that way, it's like, well, okay, if there's some feature being delivered and anything I'm doing is in support of that feature, then it's feature work, which makes complete sense to me. Like,
yeah,
a feature isn't just the code to implement it, it's everything that supports it.
Yeah. I mean, you're breaking an issue or whatever down into multiple MRs. That MR should be counted towards that feature work.
Right. So in that case, what's maintenance? It's like something that is like, it's a time pass thing. It's like, if this is not a feature that we have actively worked on for like in months, okay, then it's maintenance. Otherwise, it's in support of some feature delivery.
Yeah.
And but it says maintenance is reducing technical debt.
Yeah. Which if it's technical debt, it's like, well, I did part of this feature. Now today I'm doing the other part of it. That's not technical debt. That's like, I'm working on this feature iteratively.
And are pipeline changes not tests? Or is that like specifically related? Because if a pipeline fails,
pipeline is
that is a specific one for that. Yeah. So that's maintenance. That's pretty clear, right?
I think test is misleading, and I think that's incorrect.
I don't know. I take that. That's my favorite part of this whole section. It's like, yes, this is feature work, because tests are part of the feature. Like, I wouldn't deliver this feature without tests, would I? No.
I feel like the test should be there to support the changes that you're making. But if you're going in and like fixing a flaky spec, that's not like a feature enhancement.
Exactly, right? Because that feature is long done and gone. It's not active feature work. That is maintenance.
Well, the I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I do think the tests, I think that's erroneously here, but I won't.
I guarantee you that whoever wrote this section did not put nearly the thought into it that we are right now.
I feel like it means like it should include good user value, usability, and it should include tests, like this type of work. Not that like it includes just tests, but like the features that you are working on in an MR should include tests.
Well, yeah.
But that's how I would.
That's very true. And at times, I mean, that's a good point, because then, yeah, I forgot the word of this, but we're knee deep, like, and
waxing poetic.
How many angels can dance on the head of a pin?
Exactly. That's where we're at. But this is probably a good one to save off, especially being in the as a merge request coach that needs to triage community contributions. This is helpful. And as I interpret this, also through the lens of what Chad was describing, it seems like maintenance is, if it has to first not be a feature or a bug. So it's like, if something is pretty close to a bug, we're going to give it a bug. If something's pretty close to a feature, we're going to give it a feature. But then if it's not definitely not a feature or a bug, and we're doing just general maintenance stuff, that's where it goes.
Yeah, infrastructure or things that haven't been touched in forever is sort of like clearly common code, not related to any feature, that has not been touched forever. That's kind of my only things that fall into maintenance in my book. And for our personal group, I'm very liberal with the feature flag. And sometimes people will go in and change it, reviewers, but I'm like, the numbers don't matter. Honestly, it's just when they look at our metrics, and that's what Eric said when he was talking about this in the retro yesterday, I think. He's like, they said, how are your numbers so stable across, the editor group? Your feature bar is just like the same size right through the middle, and you got some bugs and maintenance. And he's like, I literally never look at this graph. I do not care about this graph.
Wow. This naturally happening. That's a natural.
Yeah. Wow, it's the same way. Like if you strictly TDD, like you saw this at Pivotal, if you do strict test-driven development, almost all the time, you hit about 90% test coverage, just naturally.
Yeah.
Even if you never look at it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Handbooks define when something is a bug issues. Okay, interesting. Yeah, interesting. All right, that's a good question.
Which interestingly is less than we require, which is 100% if you touch the file.
Yeah. You better test everything.
Every
line. Better test twice.
Every line.
That's funny. You bet if a community contributor accidentally removes half the tests, it should still have 100% test coverage.
It's so like even in the spike mode I'm doing in remote development, I'm still writing tests just to like help myself.
Yeah.
But it's so funny. Like I wrote this test. I'm like, yeah, this is a little algorithm. I tested it. The test is good. And there was a bug in it. And there was a bug in my test. And it was still.
Man, you got to write tests for your tests. That's what the integration tests are, I guess. That's funny. The getting to that high level of percentage, the way I think of it is like with TDD, there's tests that are really helpful during development, and that gets you really close. But then you just harden everything else. So it's like whatever is not covered, we just write some hardening tests. I don't know how strict TDD that is, but I know that test hardening idea that's an idea I read in a book.
My metaphor for like getting to 100% coverage, which I think is a good goal. Some people argue that it's not. It's like you've got a safety net, right? And it's like, do you want your safety net to be like just as good as it needs to be, or do you want to have like every single strand there?
Yeah. But you can't get over the top with it, but it's a good goal. Yeah.
100% line coverage, not 100% branch coverage, but line coverage. Like if you have an if branch that is not covered at all, like you should have a test for that, or just delete it.
Right. Or if your code
like ternary or maybe something, I don't know.
Right. But I mean, even if your code is having lots of branches, that's a pretty good sign of the difficulty of branch coverage. Implies maybe you should split things up.
If the climatic complexity is too high.
Yeah.
It's not cohesive enough.
Yep. Yeah. Well, is there any other code review topics, questions that we should discuss, or are we thinking about pairing up on a code review?
I don't have any more questions. I have a maybe thing we can pair up on that I just got assigned.
Oh, that'd be good.
Well, I don't know when it was assigned to me, but
what do you do when you feel like you can't wrap your head around an MR to correctly maintain a review and like you don't feel safe about it? You do pass it on, or you just take your time, or you
That's a really good question.
So you feel better.
What do you do, Terry?
Well, I mean, for the maintainer stuff, it's hard. I have tried to adopt like Paul's advice, is to like ask all the questions as I'm going through it that come to me, and then go back and like see which ones do I want to keep all of them or not. I like to make sure that it's reviewed by someone like from that person's team that knows what's going on, because sometimes I do get some complex ones with like maybe like LFS where I don't know how that feature works. And so if it's been reviewed by someone that like knows the feature, knows how they wanted it to work, I do my best to try to give it another review, thinking about like how it fits into like GitLab as a whole, but also I tend to focus more on like, are we following all the coding standards? I don't know if it's really that complex. I don't know if I've passed some off. I didn't tell them it was because it's too complex. I'm just like, I did not have time to like dig into this. And it's really the truth, because it's like, you know, I get something and I'm like, okay, I don't have the time to dig into this right now. Like, I'm just going to pass this off to another maintainer.
I'm imagining you writing.
Have somebody in their group review it as well?
I have before, like if it hasn't been, I haven't run into too many where you get something super complex that doesn't have someone that's like from the other person's group that's reviewed it.
What were you going to say, Paul?
Oh, I was going to say that I imagine Terry writing a comment. I don't have time for all caps, bold, this MR.
Table flip.
I was just like, I don't have the bandwidth for this. Well, I mean, if it's like small changes, but if you go in and it's like, 25 files and it's very complicated and I don't feel like I have a good view on it, I'm probably just more prone to passing it off. And
it's really great to at least say, like, there's a lot of complexity here that I'm not able to follow. Just being able to say something about this is not easy to follow.
Yeah,
it's
probably
a great signal to communicate transparently somehow.
Yeah. My experience has been so weird. Like almost all the stuff I worked on GitLab has like been off in a corner or greenfield. And then now, like, there's been no other backend. I guess there's Casio now, but he's sort of like off in Pages. There's been no other backend engineer for like going on a year. So there's like nobody else to review my code when I write it on the team.
When I review MRs, I always check them out locally because I'm often changing them as I read it. I read it and I change it to.
You check what you're suggesting? Because I do that sometimes where I'm like, I want to see before I suggest this if it will work.
Yeah.
I'll make a change.
But if it's like, okay, you have to go through multiple containers to even touch this feature. If it's something like I'm not even gonna be able to test this. If I'm reading something, I'm confused by it. A question in my head often is, why isn't it like this? And I'm sure there's reasons, but here's the ideal. If I was reading this is what I would imagine it would be laid out. And I see it's not. Is there a reason why? Is this something we can work towards? Is it something that we haven't considered or we did consider? So that I always check out code locally. And if something isn't making sense, either A, if it's something that doesn't make sense because I don't understand why it was done this way, or B, if it just doesn't make sense because we're integrating with libraries and third parties, it's like all sorts of interfaces that I have no idea about. My ask is, can we co-locate all that complexity? Because if it's some inherited complexity because we're like needing to interact with some sort of Google API, that needs to just live in one box and let's make everything else simple.
And encapsulate it behind an interface that clearly exposes what you want to do with it and test it.
Yeah. And that's something that I remember learning from Bob Martin a long time ago. Is anything that crosses the architectural boundary, let's put that and co-locate that in one thing, because you likely want to mock that if you're doing tests and stuff or whatever.
Right. And then you could do enemy unit tests, which I heard that term years ago, and it's a really powerful concept. That same interface that you build around this whatever external thing that you can mock from this direction, you can also write what's called an enemy unit test, which is, okay, it's like an integration test, but it says, I'm going to use this real thing through this interface in the way that I expect it, through my, narrowly filtered interface. And I'm going to run this all the time in CI to ensure that this external API, that this library works the way I expect it to. And what that gives you is like when you do a version upgrade of that thing, then those enemy tests, the enemy is a third-party thing. It could change at any time. It could break me at any time. And when you upgrade it, it's like, okay, does it still fulfill what I need it to do, regardless of how it may have changed over this upgrade? Or for an external API, it's like, is this API still returning the same thing? Did they break it without even versioning their API?
Yeah.
And that interface is like the natural boundary to be able to do that if you're strict about it.
Yeah. And I think it just goes to show you don't have to understand everything, but understanding if there's things you don't understand, let's co-locate it and put it in a box. And hopefully we can untangle everything else around it. But I love that idea. Oh my gosh. I love the perspective of, our third-party dependencies aren't our allies. They're like enemies we've made temporary peace with that we need.
The problem is when the API is a fluid interface, where like you get this thing and then you call something on that thing, it gives you another thing, and then you get another thing. It does not lend it. It's almost impossible to use that approach because you have to violate the law of Demeter to work with the thing at all.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It's a good question, Jen.
So
I don't know if we gave you a good answer, but I totally don't feel bad about passing things off. And I've actually had maintainers pass off MRs that I've made where they're like, I don't feel comfortable reviewing something that is backed by Elasticsearch, which is fine. So our team does tend to, if it's a very complex, I try to use a maintainer from my own team. There's a lot, just sometimes there's things that it can affect that unless you've worked directly with the global search work that you wouldn't know to think of. So
yeah.
So, but Paul, you make a good point. If something is too complex, I just need to be like, hey, this is a little bit too complex. I don't understand it. I also don't want to review it. So I'm passing on.
Yeah. And I think everyone that contributes to GitLab they take that feedback seriously. Yeah. And I think people need to hear that. And when I put in MRs that I'm like, okay, we're having to solve a hard problem. So here's the crazy idea I had when I was running. Let's see if people like it.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I'll get back of like, this is so magical and weird. I don't like it. And that's really good feedback to me. It's like, okay, I thought it was good for a minute.
Yeah.
Let's not do it. And we need that feedback. It's really good.
I also feel like doing those how to test instructions by authors, and if you self-review your stuff, it's easier to catch whether something's too complicated.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of people doing the self-review, but there are some folks who do. And when I review their code, I'm like, thank you.
Yeah.
Because they leave me little notes and then I don't have to think about things. The notes are usually pretty helpful.
I know what you're thinking. There's nothing to look here in this test file. Just skip to the text file.
No, it's just like, oh, I had a question about that. Oh, cool. They left a comment where I can now give that comment a thumbs up because I've read it. And I did have it like, oh, I appreciate you. So,
that's
I left an MR that I got assigned to review, and I would love to see if we are.
Yeah, we got some time.
Let's looking at it very briefly. It's not. I just had a few questions.
Cool.
Not so much about.
Do you want to share your screen, or do you want me to drive?
I can share.
Okay.
Let me blow the text up a little bit, though. Yeah, my glasses are not my current prescription. So it's good for me. So this is a setup profile tabs in view. Not so crazy about this number here, but this is a front end ticket, and I feel like those tend to be larger. So it looks like we're in the process of migrating the tabs on the user profile from Haml to Vue. It's going to be split across multiple issues and MRs, which they have in Epic, which is cool. This sets up the Vue app, and the tabs don't render anything. There's an issue for each tab, and each tab will be built out individually in future MRs, and it's behind a feature flag. I will probably do this later, which is how to validate, but there's not really much other things. I typically go here and look to see like what kind of commits they have left. And I don't think this needs a change log. I guess some of the stuff that I would ask for this, I might click through these things, but I'm here to review backend code. So I'll probably just focus on that for this. This is fine. I would not, this is just like, I would not, there's nothing here to be concerned about. This diff looks pretty large. So I probably want to come back and look at this. It looks like maybe they have added a feature flag that loads in
everything.
That's not going to, I guess this is future, it's going to future load in this profile tab, but it's not doing anything yet. And maybe
just for fun, can we try to side by side this diff?
Sure.
I'm not optimistic about, I wish we were better at, this is why I check all MRs out locally, is because most local diff tools are pretty good at telling you when something is just white space changes. which is hard to tell.
Yeah. So again, this is not displaying. I think this is just all indented and it's not displaying.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's probably.
Wait, wait, can you go back down?
Sorry.
So, or scroll up. I'm getting a little thrown off with what's removed on like on line 168 versus 167. Like, why is there this condition? Oh, there was always a condition there. Oh, it's just the way.
I think it's just
the way we're reading it. It's so hard to read. All right,
yeah, I think it's just all shifted down.
Why is there red on the top left? Like if they duplicated this block and one is view and one is Haml, like what was there on the left before? Like I would expect to see like one red block on the left and two green blocks on the right for the two feature flag branches.
Well, it's because we're not doing any kind of smart white space changing.
Oh, maybe I should turn this
Let's
off.
see what I think that's still going to.
Oh, that's better.
Well,
better.
I guess it's better, but is it better?
I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. So that makes more sense. Well,
I guess this kind of makes more sense, but you can't really see. I guess you just need to know that this is like shifted in.
Oh,
which would need to have happened
for the same feature flag. That's why I was confused.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and the only thing that's a little confusing here is they have the if up here and the unless, but I mean I get what they're trying to do.
Okay.
Yeah. So
you may want to switch back the white space one if that may throw you off.
I don't remember if I might have turned that on. I don't know if I normally have it on. I'm constantly going in here and changing things. And so I'm just like, oh, well, let me just see how it looks right to me. Okay, so this is new development, default enabled 15.9. I do normally at least come in and make sure that there was one instance where somebody had an issue here and it wasn't actually the rollout issue. It was something else. So I do normally just validate that the numbers match because it's possible that the thing is not right. So that looks good to me. This we don't normally review. One thing that I did notice when I was looking at this very briefly is that, so this is really my question. This is just not updating the test, but I guess in this instance, it's okay because the code for all these tabs it's not there, right?
So I imagine, yeah, since the feature flags are enabled by default in feature spec land.
Yeah. I ran into this with another conversion from Haml to Vue, and I don't have enough experience with those. Like, how do you know, like, I guess, how can we make sure that these will be updated?
What do you
like when? Yeah, I just want to, I guess so they have issues for each of these profile pages, but like, there's nothing failing.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So like when someone goes to make the changes for whatever would make this fail, like how do you know to go in and say, oh yeah, I stubbed that to false?
This is a really good question.
I don't know.
Because what can happen is people implementing this overlook the feature specs until we're removing the flag. And then all of a sudden we see, oh, all the feature specs fail.
Yeah. So
it's worth, I would just leave a note of like, be sure to, it looks like as they're creating, they have issues for each one of the pages.
Maybe add a task to like,
they need to add
which feature, which feature test needs to be updated.
Yeah, or they need to have a task for every file where we're doing a false. We need to also have a set it to true. And does this work as well? And like that's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it doesn't need to be part of the individual issues for each page. Maybe they could have like a feature spec issue where they go in and change everything. Like, I don't know.
So that could be a question: is like, do we have a follow up for adding specs or something?
Here's an idea. Like, instead of them just stubbing into false and ignoring the feature spec, they could go ahead and add another branch for true that asserts the current behavior, which is there's a view component here that does absolutely nothing. And then when they start adding the real behavior, that will break and force them to revisit this feature spec.
Yeah, I think that's a cool way of taking it too. Either one of those.
I'll put a thing in here.
And I liked our way. Chad and I had a fun interaction. It was like 2 to 3 years ago, where we were, I think, effectively refactoring something.
There's a top menu.
Right, but we knew that the feature specs weren't going to change. Something like that. Like we knew the feature specs weren't going to change, but we wanted to set it up such that those features are going to be ready to go when somehow we use pending specs and stuff to it was an interesting approach, and I remember it being really helpful. We had a context for every one of these files for like with feature flag on, with feature flag off, and the one with on was going to have the same feature specs, but it like decorated pending around it because those weren't quite ready yet. But then once it came to removing everything, it was pretty.
Yeah, you didn't have to do a lot of updates when you removed the feature flag and didn't have the context anymore.
Yeah.
I really like the idea of setting it to true and making sure it doesn't do something, because then that means that will fail when they change it.
Yeah.
I like that so much better. That is a great idea.
There's another gotcha here that I discovered with the broken master that we ran into, Chad, when we were working on Saturday or something, which is normal schedule for me. I was surprised Chad was on.
Normal for me too.
Oh, okay. I'm just playing. The some spec, the reason the author knew to put these here is because they used the pipeline failures to dictate I need to throw these feature flags. However, some specs are pending or might be
like maybe
due to flakiness.
Flaky, yep.
And once that gets unskipped because it's fixed, but now it's broken because we have this feature flag thing, we'll have a broken master. So
but how did that ever get on master? Like that should have been caught on some MR when they unpinned.
The MR pipeline skipped that job because somehow it was detected as flaky.
Oh, I saw the post about that. I saw the post about that someone posted. So I also ran into that where a bug got through an MR that we reviewed, and I'm like, how are these specs passing? Because the specs are changed. And I looked and I'm like, these specs are wrong. Like they should not pass. And then nothing was in the pipeline. The entire top level of the spec was skipped with an issue assigned to it. And I'm like, so we made changes to the spec. It's not even being run.
That's tough.
And if you didn't run it locally, you wouldn't know that it wasn't being run. And so I almost wish there was some automation or pipeline that's like, there are flaky specs that this MR touches. Like you should fix them, or at least be aware that this is skipped so that you can take a look at it.
It's worth introducing it's worth asking a question on Slack if would adding the pipeline run all spec or something, does that skip our skipping thing? What's really scary to me is what's defined as flaky comes from something outside of our code base, I think.
Yeah.
So what that means is there's some change outside of the code base.
That's what I was going to ask. Like it shouldn't be able to make it in an MR. Like that thing should be hooked to trigger. Like you can't change that without an MR.
Or like if an MR touches a flaky spec, however it's detected to be flaky, it should always be run.
Yeah.
Like but I got caught by
feature flags imply we need to run all our specs.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about. Potentially even like Jihu may have we may be inadvertently breaking their pipeline because they may have their own specs.
We have a new pipeline for them, but I feel like it's allowed to fail, and mine's been failing a bunch. So I'm kind of like not sure what to do with that. But I'm glad that we now have a pipeline for it. It just feels like it's maybe under development still. So
yeah. Cool.
But thanks for looking through the MR with me. And I really appreciate the suggestions. I'm going to keep those in the back of my mind for the next time I see this feature flag.
Thanks for bringing it up, Terry. Appreciate it. All right. You all have a great rest of the day.
Yeah.
Adios.
Bye.